By speaking of the meaning of life, one can open numerous topics that allow the human mind to formulate numerous concepts. The topics can range from the scientific ones. We can talk about life in philosophical terms, or religious ones, which claim to know the truth by offering certainties more than philosophers and scientists. Any question you want to ask about the meaning of life always leaves you with more doubts than they had before receiving the answer. In this video today, I want to talk about life not so much looking for its meaning, but rather analyzing some elements present in all forms of life, trying through this process to deconstruct the common concepts about the reasons for life that we have learned directly from philosophical culture, religious, and scientific, but to make sense only through what we can really observe and understand. Starting from this point, the first observation certainly goes to understand how these three forms of life are composed. All three are made up of chemical elements present on our planet. Their basic structure is given by the genetic code or DNA that forms the cells, and these, in turn, form the various organisms that then give shape to the living being. The physical structure of living things is therefore formed by following a common process. Another common aspect in life forms consists in the growth and transformation. An insect, a flower, an animal, and a human being change their shape during life, acquiring peculiarities. Another common aspect is the need to feed oneself to continue living and growing, and all forms of life, after being born and raised, grow old and die. The list could be much longer. Also, from a physical point of view, these three forms of life differ both in their form and in the way they live. As far as shape and physical structure are concerned, the differences are tangible. The way they live is further different. The plants, for example, remains fixed in the environment where it is born and is perfectly adapted. They feed by drawing resources from the soil such as water, minerals, vitamins. The plants world as well as the animal world is extremely varied. Let's consider, for example, grass and a tree. Animals, on the other hand, feed mainly on plants, and in some cases also on other animals. They too are perfectly adapted to the environment in which they live. Finally, human beings also have different physical characteristics from plants and animals. They feed on plants and animals, the characteristics of the human being. In addition, he can adapt the environment to itself, thanks to the numerous capacities it possesses. It is almost obvious to say that nature has organized reality in such a way that all forms of life are interdependent on each other. Another important element is that they are all able to perceive the reality of the environment around them in different ways. For example, plants perceive light, through which they activate chlorophyll photosynthesis, which allows, together with other processes, to live and grow. Animals have some abilities such as that of perceiving ultrasound, or some insects perceive electromagnetic or ultraviolet fields. All this means that each form of life lives its own dimension linked to its characteristics. The plant is probably unable to perceive animals or humans because it does not possess sense organs that can put them in contact with each other. But both the plant and the animals and humans all live in the same reality. We can now say that each form of life develops its own way of life, determined by its capacities. If the nature of plants and animals is perfectly adapted to the environment in which they live, in the case of human beings, this aspect takes on different characteristics. Human beings use their ability to adapt the external environment to themselves. Another human need is to live a pleasant life. Human beings seek this happiness in many ways. This can depend on individual, cultural, or social reasons. From a social point of view, the idea of happiness is often generated within social rules and stereotypes. Here, it is not important to discuss it. Instead, it's important to understand what all the rules are that establish these dynamics. Leaving aside concepts related to the search for inner happiness through one's own way of life, there is certainly a condition of well-being linked to the circumstances in which one lives. This aspect reveals once again the interdependence of life forms with their surroundings. From a macroscopic point of view, what society does every day is certainly the use of natural resources. One of the characteristics that differentiates the human being from other forms of life is that it seems that the human being has no natural competitors. And this is the reason why the human population grows every year, saturating the environment in which it lives. Just think about how cities are organized. If you think that in the early 1900s, the world population was only 1 billion inhabitants, today, 120 years later, it has become almost 8 billion. However, when the use of resources and the modification of the environment exceeds a certain threshold, we can no longer speak of a balanced use of resources, but rather of the exploitation of resources and the environment. Overexploitation, in addition to being due to needs and population growth, is also determined by the type of economy on which our society is based. The social implications due to the consumerist economic system are a complex topic, which deserves further study. Let me know in the comments if you may be interested in a dedicated video. At the moment, what is important to know and how this system that is part of our daily life is actually the cause of the destruction of 40% of the world's resources in the last 100 years alone. When we talk about the exploitation of resources, this also applies to other forms of life. The possibility of always having supermarkets stocked with every food item such as meat, cheese, milk, dairy products, clothes made with fine furs, being able to spend a day at the zoo where to take the children, are the consequence of an unnatural exploitation beyond measure of animal life. Behind the photograph of a hamburger, there are animals kept in cages where they can't even move, a fashion show where furs are shown. There is the slaughter of baby seals, foxes, beavers, but also cats, dogs, and many other animals. To go to the zoo to see all kinds of exotic animals, you must take them out of their natural environment and force them to live a completely unhappy life for them. If we consider that every form of life has the same needs, as I explained at the beginning of the video, then the human being should reflect much more on these aspects. These processes that we have triggered in our society are completely unnatural. All forms of life, as we have seen, are interconnected and all have identical needs. Therefore, it is a common responsibility to make sure that every action is also thought out in the interests of the entire surrounding environment. If we continue to disregard the consequences for the environment caused by our often unconscious behavior, the future of the next generations may be jeopardized with the consequence that they will live a miserable and hopeless life. The video ends here. If you found this topic interesting, share it with your friends and family. Doing so, you help the channel grow and create an ever-growing community where you can share opinions that can become useful for the development of social and individual awareness. Thank you. We'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.